Hello everyone and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name's Michael and I'm bitten by a radioactive book. It's May already and so I want to talk about all the books I've read in April. I read a total of 7 books and now let's see what I thought of them. First off, I read Bane and Shadow by John Scovron. It's the second installment in his Empire of Storms series, I think it's called. And we are still following our characters of Hope and Red that we know from the first book, also titled Hope and Red. This is like a mix of sword and sorcery and epic fantasy, and it's really fast-paced. It's quite enjoyable, and so also this like second installment got 4 stars from me, which the first one already did as well. Next up, I read Dagger Spell by Catherine Kerr. One thing I wanted to do this year is read a little bit more like classical fantasy, like fantasy from the 70s, 80s, 90s, because when I was in that period of time, I read mainly like role-playing game tie-in novels. So I've read a lot of fantasy, but I missed out on some of the very like core or essential books. And yeah, one of the series that I found very interesting is the Demery series by Catherine Kerr, and Daggerspell is the first installment. And what I really like, there is a unique idea behind this book. It's like characters that get together at some point in the past. Yeah, these souls of these characters get somehow connected. And the souls of the characters get like reborn over and over again. Like it's 5 characters and 4 of them are getting reborn over and over again. And the 5th, mysteriously, doesn't seem to age that much or survives over centuries. You have to find out for yourself why that is. And he always seeks out or seeks for these reincarnations, and sometimes over the decades and centuries he finds them. Then they're all mixed together in like very different constellations. Yeah, so we have like a story in the present time of the story that continues, and then we all always get like these glimpses in the past, like how the souls first met, and then 1 or 2 episodes like in between. And that makes up for a really interesting reading experience that, yeah, as I said, is quite unique. And so I enjoyed myself. I think this is something for readers that like a little bit more like character-focused fantasy. It's a little bit more slow-paced. So names like Robin Hobb or maybe Juliet Marillion come to mind. The surroundings of the world are like very Celtic-inspired. So yeah, it's definitely recommended, and I'm going to put the second book on my TBR for next month. Next up, I read 6 Wakes by Mur Lafferty. This is a very interesting concept. Once again, quite a unique idea. It's like clones wake up on a spaceship and find out that they are like recloned because apparently one of them has killed all of them. The interesting part is that they don't have their like memories at the moment, and so it's like an interesting like murder mystery in a oh, we're sealed in a spaceship and live together kind of situation. And yeah, that makes for quite an interesting read. Overall, I wasn't like too how can I say, like impressed with the way the book actually then wound up in the end, but it's still like a very good and entertaining read. So I rated it 3 stars. Next up, I read Orb Scepter Throne by Ian C. Asselmont. It's the 4th installment in his Malice and Empire series. This book plays mainly in Darujistan. It's the city that we already got to know in the very first book, Gardens of the Moon, of Stephen Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen series. And this should be like set in the time a little bit between the 8th book of Stephen Erickson's series and the final 2 volumes. I think it won't make sense to talk to you about what this is actually about. As you can expect from a Malazan book, there's a plethora of characters, some known to us, some new to us, and yeah, I thought it was, to date, if you just go through the Malazan Empire, my favorite book of the Malazan Empire. So I rated it 4 stars, and I'm really looking forward to get to the final 2 volumes in the series soon. Next up, I read Saint's Blood, the 3rd installment in Sebastian de Castell's Greatcoat series. This is sword and sorcery, kind of the Three Musketeers in a fantasy secondary world. I think a lot of you will have heard of this series because it's making the rounds on BookTube SFF. A lot of the fantasy booktubers have read the series, and I think all of us like the series a lot, or even love the series. This was actually a 5-star read for me, because next to the books normally are like typical 4 stars for me. That they are a lot of fun. Yeah, they they are fast-paced, they have great banter between like the different characters, they have like interesting characters, but it always missed a little bit for me to be like a 5-star book, just like to be like a 5-star book out of fun reasons. But this book actually has some very like interesting parallels, I think, to what's happening in like our society at the moment, and why people follow certain other people, why people tend to yeah, um, be gotten into fanatism and things like that. And so there was like a really fine line beneath the story that I actually enjoyed a lot, and yeah, that brought me to give this particular book 5 stars. Then I read The Barrel by Mark Smiley. I read this as a buddy read with Sam from Sam's Nonsense, and unfortunately Sam didn't finish the book, so we couldn't talk about like the end and how it developed. This is a strange book because from the outside it looks like, yeah, just like a typical book, like, oh, there's a party of grave robbers, and there is like a map, and they follow that map because they want to find like a sword. But it's actually like grave robbing the dark pawn version. Because it's actually, although it sounds like a light sword and sorcery, it's actually a very grim dark book, and it deals a lot with like desires, obsessions, lusts, passion of characters. I haven't read a book so far that has so many graphic like sexual scenes in it, in a fantasy book. Especially like in the first third, you think you're reading like an erotica fantasy, because the sexual acts and excesses are so like dominant, um, but thankfully the book has more to offer to that. In the end, I rated it 3 stars because towards like each part, like the first part, the second part, and the last part got like more interesting, and I wanted to know and wanted to find out what's going to happen to the characters. But I can see that this book is definitely not for everyone. My particular like issue with like the first third of the book is the way that the author uses exposition. Like there's always a scene, or the first chapters are always built like the same way. Like there is a sexual scene either at the beginning, in the middle, or at the ending, and in one of the other parts there is always like a character that walks from A to B, and while he walks he thinks, and thus we are given like exposition. There's really lengthy walking and thinking about, oh, how does the God God and deity pantheon system work, and how do people from different countries look like. Of course, we get this in the mind of a brothel owner who goes through all of his employees and tells us, basically how the various exotic, like women and man whores of his brothel look, but it's really just like an exposition while he walks from A to B. And I found that a little bit clumsy, so you could spot that this is a debut novel by Mark Smiley, and I'm very interested to see there was a book, actually a second book announced in the same world with the same characters called Blackheart, but it was announced for August 2015. And the book is still a no-show. So the interesting thing would be, is this actually ever going to happen? Or has Mark Smiley given up on writing? Or is he taking a really long time to maybe don't make that many mistakes as he has made with this first book? It's still like an entertaining read, so I gave it 3 stars. It's in no way like a bad book per se, but if you go into it, expect lots of sex, lots of like darkness and violence and bad people. And the last book I finished in April was Cyrus by E.J. Swift. It's the first installment in her series called The Osiris Project. And this has a very interesting premise, like the water levels have risen on the world, and there is this town of Osiris, and apparently they don't have like contact to anyone else anymore, so they are assuming that they are the last survivors um, of this rise of the water level, and so they have like a city there that is basically like cut in half by a wall, and in the eastern part, or in the city, most of the people live in luxury, or are at least like wealthy and living well, and in the west there is a part where everything is going to waste. People live in like skyscrapers without much like furniture, just sharing space to not be outside in the rain or something like that. So there's like a very huge division between poor and rich in this world. And so we get like 2 characters in this book: Adelaide, who's like from the rich side, and her twin brother Axel is gone missing, and her parents, or her whole family, don't seem to be that interested in actually finding him, and so she takes that task upon her. And on the other hand, we have oh, I'm blanking on the name. It's Wakram or something like that. Vikram, I think it's Vikram. And Vikram lives on the western side of the town, and has like the hope that if he goes before like the ruling city council, he can make like a point for the people living in the west, and to better like their situation. And so we're seeing how both characters like follow their ambitions, and of course meet up during the story and get involved with each other. And that was like a very interesting concept. I have to say I was more interested in the part of Adelaide than the one of Vikram, so I would say like the Adelaide part, if it would have just been that, would be more maybe of a 4-star read for me, but the Vikram read was like more like a 2.5-star read for me, so I ended up giving this book like 3 stars in the end. For me, it lived a lot also from its interesting world building of this city just being surrounded by water. And they also have like, yeah, nautical terms for a lot of things that they're using, so the world building was very interesting. Plot and characters were more on the okay side. But that it's the first book in a trilogy, and still I want to like continue with these books and continue with the trilogy. So these were all the books I managed to read in April. If you read any of them, please tell me below what you thought in the comments, or what was your favorite read in April. Let me know. And of course, as always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of me, subscribe to my channel. And until next time, I hope that you get bitten by a really good book too. Bye.